This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech players in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe, a special episode today. I am Matteo Rizzi, the executive producer of the show. Today we talk about cross-border payments, and we do it with Currencycloud, who gladly is sort of bringing this show together for us. And our special guests are from Visa and Revolut. I will ask to start with our guests to introduce themselves for a couple of minutes, starting with Richard. Richard, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Welcome. What an introduction. No, thank you. Listen, really good to be here, and obviously great to be here with friends in Revolut and Visa. So I'm Richard. I am co-founder and chief evangelist, a lofty title for Currencycloud. For those listening who don't know, so Currencycloud are an embedded cross-border payments platform. So what that means is we are the cross-border infrastructure. So we supply the likes of Revolut and other kind of fintechs and banks and FX and payments companies. And we were actually acquired last year by our friends at Visa after probably 2 or 3 years kind of courting. We worked with them. We had a kind of commercial relationship with them and partnerships as kind of we worked together on the whole cross-border piece. So we are now kind of part of Visa and looking forward to what the next kind of years kind of bring in terms of our joint missions, right, of kind of connecting the world with payments. And it's great to be here.
Thank you, Richard. I actually have, I'm super proud of Currencycloud, being here with us because, for the ones who are like old enough to remember the InnoTribe times, Currencycloud won InnoTribe. I don't even know. Could it be like 10 years ago or something? Whatever. It's probably like close. Yeah, close.
I mean, this was in the days when it wasn't fintech; it was kind of new finance, right?
Exactly.
So fintech was a word that I think was created, and
something like that. And I'm glad because this whole thing of this InnoTribe alumni kind of being acquired, and actually from one alumni to another one, because Revolut is another winner, back in the days. So it looked like somehow, Swift sort of touched a lot of stones that became gems. Hugh, welcome to Breaking Banks Europe.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So Hugh Kingdon, I've been around the industry, a little bit of a veteran. For those who are looking at audio, you probably can't see that I've got a bald head and
they actually can, unfortunately. They actually can.
These are the stress lines of payments. And essentially, I'm ex-Visa, ex-MasterCard, a big bank who I won't name. My role in Revolut, who I work for and advise, is I am essentially head of card payments, VP card payments, and my job is to help advise Revolut. And before that, I was actually in Visa, and I actually introduced Revolut into the Visa family and subsequently did a deal. So I first met Nick when Revolut was a company with just 13 employees. How things have changed. Here we are, almost 20 million customers and a valuation bigger than the NatWest Group. Wow, just wow. What a journey that has been. And so I've been kicking around the industry for a long time. I first got involved in let's call it fintech, but I take the point that it wasn't called it then. I actually worked for a company that subsequently got bought by MasterCard, a company called Mondex, and we were minting cryptocurrencies before mobile phones had data and just as the internet was being invented. Oh boy, did we get the timing
my
wrong.
God, you sound so old, Hugh.
Mate, it makes me feel old.
You don't
Remember
look
those
like
phones which they had 3 lines of text and they worked at about 300 baud on the data service. Well, I actually built, when I was working for a big bank, the first ever mobile banking service for credit cards in Europe. Oh, a technical success, but boy, a commercial flop. Well ahead of our time. And Revolut is an example of a company that has hit the sweet spot, a good proposition with a good customer experience at the right point.
Thank you so much. And actually, you guys seems to go back for a while. So Terry, you're not a startup. You don't work the startup at least, but you almost act like one, right? Because you seems to acquire the right the companies that are agilizing the business. You're trying to, if not disrupt, certainly innovate. Welcome to Breaking Banks Europe, Terry.
Thanks, Matteo. And wonderful to have such great guests on here. Actually, my role at Visa, I'm the global head of fintech and crypto. I actually came to Visa via an acquisition. So Visa was an investor in a company called TrialPay. They acquired the business. So we brought a lot of our kind of startup perspective to the fintech space. Hugh was actually one of the first people that I met at Visa who was an evangelist for fintech within Visa. And I spent most of my time really trying to figure out how to bring all of this fintech innovation onto our platform. As a payment rail, we are not the company who is out there creating new payment experiences. That is what Revolut is doing. That is what our clients are doing. We are there to support them. So that's where I spend my time. Excited to dive into the topics today with these fun guests.
So actually, we are amongst grown-uppers, okay? Put it like this, it is just that our current hats, might represent an incumbent, but we all come from let me call it the disruption side. Right. And let's start with you. So the topic is cross-border payments. And if I take a super simplified, when we prepare the show, I always tell this anecdote about Revolut, because when Revolut won Tribe, Nick and Vlad, put the Revolut beta on my phone. I was working for a fund. We miss Revolut, but that's history. But truth is that back then it was really, it started like a multi-currency wallet, to agilize, the literally cross-border payments. And then, thousands of miles later, Revolut become like a super app, way to. And again, I'm using a language that you are going to refine, and the question or the topic I want to start with is let's picture a little bit this cross-border payments space, and how has the business evolved, in the past decade, and why are players like Revolut started that disruption, of what was a really, really inefficient and super profitable for the banks, I must say as well, market.
Yeah, so I think that when the two founders, both of whom are immigrants into the UK, they experienced firsthand all of the problems associated with the cross-border transactions, both the spending and also the movement of money from one account to another. And, it still is in many ways an oligopoly of big players carving up the market and gouging customers for FX fees, for account fees, for transaction fees. And it represented a really poor consumer value proposition. So it was ripe for disruption at that time. And the insights that Nikolai and Vlad had about creating separate accounts, one for each currency, and only making the change when you needed to, and allowing customers to move money between the accounts essentially for free at the interbank rate, the actual the cost of moving the money. It created this incredible value proposition. And I remember when I went to Visa, I worked for Visa, sorry. I went to a major airline and I said, hey, look, we're working for this with this company called Revolut. And they said, yeah, we all know Revolut. Our pilots, our air stewardesses, they all use Revolut. We love Revolut. And one of the things that Nikolai and Vlad got right very, very early on was being top of table in terms of the ratings, getting the actual pricing right, but also being top of the table in terms of the customer experience. And even now, here we are with almost 20 million customers. The vast majority, the biggest single channel of customers that we get are referrals from other customers and getting recommended by other customers. So those principles of a great price and a great customer service, they haven't changed. But the market hasn't changed. They're still attractive. That's still working for us. And then as we enter each new country, that still works. However, as we have begun to grow and mature, if we want to continue to have the best product, we're augmenting that product with a range of other services. And in fact, I took a look in preparation for this at a presentation that I had never seen before, which was actually Nick and Vlad's original pitch to investors. It's quite fun, actually. And when you take a look at their original pitch to investors, it actually sets out the spending and the money movement. And it talks about freemium, the fact that they will offer a range of services and some of those will be paid for. And actually, the journey of Revolut has been in augmenting the other sets of services that we have to create a nice, sticky proposition that is holistic in the way in which we want it to work. Now, we've expanded that set of services from consumers into businesses, and we've expanded that set of services into adjacent. Now, as a consumer, I don't have an FX problem. I want to book a holiday. I want to travel. So what we're beginning to do is augment the set of services with things like Revolut Stays, which is a Revolut travel booking service. We are augmenting it for businesses with pay your staff in multiple currencies. So we are working to enhance the value. But if I bring it back to where we started for a second, one of the genius moments of Nick and the team was that you are more likely to get divorced than you are to change your bank. So let's build a product which doesn't have the same barriers to adoption. I have here my wallet, and in my wallet I have some cards. I have some Moroccan dirham. I have some pounds, and of course the inevitable mask. And I also have a lot of cards. To earn that space, to get another card in that wallet, I need to really do something different. This is my First Direct, my HSBC account. To earn the right to do that, I've got to do something different. And what Revolut did was something different. It was a different reason to take up a card. And as a result, with that lower level of friction, they have been able to grow much faster than some of the other players. And that works in the UK, where they launched, and it works around the world. So what they're seeking to do as they grow and add new services is to continue to disrupt each new business that they entered, just like they disrupted the cross-border business. An example would be insurance, where they launched travel insurance, which you pay by the day.
Hugh, for those who couldn't see, Hugh was literally throwing cards out of his wallet and sort of hitting the floor. So I'd love to know what else is in that wallet. I think, Matteo, one of the sort of benefits we get at Visa is we sit in this privileged position. We get to see incredible fintech companies like Revolut and others build these global solutions. And I think what sort of Hugh was talking about is a trend that we see often, which is how do you create a global experience, a single app, a single set of services across multiple jurisdictions. And we have this kind of constant tension, I think, where people's expectations are global services, but fintech is inherently a local business. If you want to have a card operate in a different country, you often need to conform to local rules. You might need a local bank sponsor. If you're operating in different currencies, you have all of the local fiat currencies to deal with. So one of the sort of very interesting trends we watch is how do you create global infrastructure across a lot of local markets? And that's what Currencycloud and Revolut are doing, is effectively adding these abstraction layers so that to the consumer, I have a single card, I spend it everywhere, and I act like a local in each market, even though as I cross borders and spend in different currencies, I'm actually operating under different jurisdictions and under different sets of rules. And I think that's one of the great trends that we see. And as a network, we think this is a wonderful value proposition to both consumers, better value for them, more convenience, and to businesses who are often the entities that are most impacted by cross-border payments. There's $120 trillion of B2B payments every year, and a big chunk of those are cross-border. So this is an area that we are excited about, and I'd love to get Richard's perspective just on how that sort of cross-border friction gets alleviated with infrastructure like Currencycloud and others.
Thank you, Terry. Actually, Richard, before he kicks in, I also, I'm usually the blunt guy, and also because as I animate and be the host of different type of content, I am also the thermometer, of the language and of what we vehicle to our auditors. Richard, whilst you answer to Terry's question as well, please give our auditors who are not payment experts, because some of them are not, okay, how is the positioning of Currencycloud has evolved, in terms of building these rails? Because it also seems to me that it started as a site of more behind the scene sort of work, and progressively you guys have expanded, and that's why sort of Visa decided that you were instrumental, to build that payments ecosystem Terry was talking about.
There's a lot in there to unpack, I think.
I know, right? But that's why you confounded the team, man.
Yeah.
You're the man.
So this, I think we've always been behind the scenes, right? That's always been our value proposition. We are quite happy, and people like Revolut have been the trailblazers and have had such a huge impact on the industry. It's been beautiful because, like Terry was saying, we're in quite a privileged position because we can kind of sit there and be an infrastructure provider to the really smart companies who are driving change. And we're just happy that we've played a part in that, kind of being the infrastructure provider. I think what's changed from day one to now, I think there's probably more infrastructure providers. And so they're getting more share of kind of PR, because, I think you said the original question was, for a lot of these people, why start with cross-border payments? But the whole concept of kind of embedded finance, and actually, I like to think, and knowing Nick and Vlad in the early days, they started with cross-border payments because there was a provider in Currencycloud who can make that happen, right? And I think that's really important to have these infrastructure providers who can make a lot of this stuff happen. But the other thing is, and is amazing with Revolut are both a customer, but also probably one of our kind of biggest sources of inbound leads, because everybody comes to us and say, I want to be the next Revolut. So how do you do that? I think it also comes down to, let's not dodge it. It comes down to money for a lot of people, because there are still, and I know Revolut approached it slightly differently, but there was a big problem, still is a big problem in terms of the cost of FX and the cost of payments. It's huge for the consumer. So a lot of people kind of see cross-border payments as a great way to drive revenue for themselves. If they've got a vertical business and they want to go into a different kind of revenue stream, then they'll layer on payments.
Yeah, I'm always just fascinated how you manage this bridge between local infrastructure, local regulations, local currencies, but effectively present a service that is global. And so behind the scenes, the way that you're moving funds, the way that you're managing the treasury so that it looks like a seamless transaction, which is what we all want. I think, so anyway, that's the question. And would love to get maybe sort of peel back a little bit of how you guys do that, where you store funds, where you have regulated entities, et cetera, et cetera.
It's the swan analogy, right? So everything looks graceful on top of the surface, but underneath there's these two little legs kind of going crazy. And I think we're going to get into this as well, because cross-border payments or cross-border business is hard because we live in such a regulated world. So as Currencycloud, so we are regulated in the UK, thanks to our lovely government voting to leave the European Union. We're regulated in Europe, in Amsterdam. We are regulated in the US, and that's a whole different story, because the regulation is it's federal versus state by state regulation, and we could spend a whole episode on that. We're regulated in Canada, we're regulated in Singapore, and it all comes down to, I guess, not just the clever movement of money, but it's also the services that we're able to offer our customers in each of those different jurisdictions. So the easy answer to what you said is we manage it through some very, very smart people and through some very, very smart technology. And I think, and this is one of the great things about the acquisition with Visa, because I think together we can look at this and how we park our money to ultimately get close to that kind of zero cost, instant kind of payment that a lot of people are wanting. But we might also manage it with a network of, it's not just a licensing, it's a network of banking and payment providers. And that therein is the complexity of kind of cross-border payments, because you never have this kind of one bank that can do everything for you, or one payment network that can do everything for you. So it's a team of people that we've built up over the years, who are going out speaking to various different providers all around the world, that has kind of built this network that supports our customers. And we also, we look at this because we look at this from a solving a customer problem side of things, and we're a proud supplier to Revolut, but we're not Revolut's only supplier, because we only go so deep and so broad in terms of our currency capabilities, because you could never be incredible across 180, 230, whatever countries it is, and currencies. So what we've tried to do is kind of go deeper on our currency capabilities. Because then, in terms of the offering to customers, it's not just the FX and the movement of the money behind the scenes; it's the offering of multi-currency accounts and individual kind of account numbers, because of how the expectation on the customer is changing.
Richard, you touch on a couple of topics that I would love the three of you to expand a bit on. We'll do it in the second half of the show. We'll take a super quick break. But just to anticipate, two things. One is you mentioned the fact that indeed, Revolut is not your only client. But my question here is, what do you think is the role of the incumbents, and I'm doing like with quotes and quotes, meaning like the more traditional players, the more or less digital, but they could still use some of their capillarity, the trust, the fact that, they are better positioned in some of the local markets. And sort of as a segue to this topic is, how truly global do you think this cross-border payment markets can be, because I'm an investor in Africa, And we're still using the World Remit and the Asimo and the Western Union, who are like super expensive, not really efficient. And the last mile is always a challenge in certain countries. And I'm expecting a combination of the three of you guys, the perfect combination of the three of you, sort of being truly global. And like sending the money to Bulgaria in Lev should be as simple as sending CFA money to Senegal, right? But is that truly the case today? This and more in the second half of the show. It's a wrap for now.
Banks, fintechs, and businesses everywhere can make bigger, better, bolder leaps with Currencycloud. Currencycloud gives businesses the capability to move money across borders and transact globally in multiple currencies fast. Experts at what they do, their technology makes it easy for clients to embrace digital wallets and to embed finance into the core of their business, no matter what industry they're in. Working with banks, financial institutions, and fintechs around the world, Currencycloud was acquired by Visa in December 2021.
Hey guys, welcome back to the cross-border payments special show on Breaking Banks Europe. I'm still with Hugh, Richard, and Terry. We talked about at the end of the first part of the show of the role of the incumbents, and my true question as well related to this, because sometimes in certain countries, basically banks is the only thing you've got, is how global can this market, this cross-border market can be. And I'm talking especially, for example, about a continent that I know super well, which is Africa, where it's not that easy. Who wants to give it a shot? Hugh.
So we are beginning to turn our attention to those cross-border remittances. How can we make them happen? How can we change the nature? So we've just launched in the United States a free transfer service to Mexico, north-south, to begin to start driving those volumes, because price is one of those factors that will encourage people to play. I've just come back from holiday in Morocco, and in Morocco, 1/3 of the GDP comes from remittances from people sending money home. And the World Bank has always said that the cost of those remittances are too expensive. They need to be cheaper. They need to be cheaper, and it needs to be easier. The old style processes associated with a Western Union style transfer, where you go to a physical shop, you hand over some physical cash, you hand over your identity, the money whizzes its way to somewhere, somebody else hands over their identity, hands over the number, and then collects the cash. That is ripe for disruption. There is a tremendous opportunity here to do it better. As Revolut, we see lots of opportunity to improve that, frankly, broken customer experience and to serve these markets. Now, in some cases, you said, what is the role of the incumbents? Well, in some cases, those are going to be our partners, because a company like Revolut, one of the ways to do it is to send it to the bank accounts that already exist in, to use example, Morocco, and to work with incumbents. Another method would be to do something completely different, to send it to M-Pesa in Kenya, or another method. And so as we think about disruption, we need to think about how can we improve the customer experience? How can we price it right? How can we build that network that facilitates these transactions?
It could also be a crypto bridge, by the way, now that I think of it. Terry, maybe you want to talk about it later.
No, I mean, I think it's a good place to dive in. You can see on my T-shirt, Visa Crypto. I think your question, Matteo, is how does disruption occur? And actually, I'm not sure how you would define incumbents in this world. But in a cross-border payment, I think the big challenge is at the endpoints and the nodes. So you mentioned, companies like Western Union and others. the rails by which money moves are actually pretty efficient. You can use card rails, you can use bank rails, you can use crypto rails. The difficulty in sending money to any two parties is the KYC on either end. It is the regulation, and then in some cases the treasury infrastructure to manage the conversions. At Visa, we're starting to see stablecoins become a part of our clients' treasury infrastructure. We're seeing companies pay their employees in stablecoins. Now, what that does is it manages the money movement from the source to the destination. That's a pretty efficient, sort of movement of funds. But you still, if you want to buy dinner, I grew up in South Africa. If you want to buy dinner in Johannesburg, you can't buy dinner with USDC. You still have to convert that into the local currency. So there is going to be some friction at that endpoint. From a Visa standpoint, we have multiple ways of solving that. We can attach a Visa credential to that balance. And now you can just go and use your Visa debit card at the local Woolworths. We'll pay the merchant in local rand. We'll accept the USDC as a settlement currency on the network. So I think the way that this disruption happens is more and more of these, endpoints emerge. Some of them look like Revolut. Some of them look like crypto exchanges. But there's a sea of fintech companies and banks and neobanks who are able to initiate and receive these funds, and the rails on which they happen, I think, are going to get more diversified and more complicated. But the rails were never quite the issue. It's the endpoints where there's a ton of friction. And I think that's the path that we're on, is we should expect faster, much more cost-effective transfers across the entire ecosystem. And I think crypto will be one of the infrastructure rails that drives that innovation.
Yeah, let me add. I completely agree. I frame it in a slightly different way in terms of, and you always bring up, and people always ask the question of what's the role of the cool, sexy fintech versus the incumbent. But this is just people playing in position for me. And I also think, with the incumbents, what they do and how they solve stuff is they're quite kind of inside out looking sometimes in terms of, listen, we've got a bunch of products, and this is kind of what we do, go and take them. Whereas what fintech have done have kind of taken that customer problem issue and gone outside in and said, we're going to go and really solve a problem here. And we're going to build, and fintechs are agile enough to go and react quickly to that customer kind of problem. But I completely agree with what kind of Terry's saying. And I'm sure a follow-up question will be, I think it is, so who will own kind of payments in the future? Is it going to be the incumbents? Is it going to be the fintechs? Is it going to be the big techs? And I think, listen, everybody's got a part to play, right? And what I'm really excited, and Matteo, you're asking, we posed the challenge of kind of Africa as an example, what I love about the fintech space in general, but what I'm excited about around the relationship with kind of Visa and how Visa see it. This is about, they talk about connecting the world. We talk about kind of reimagining the way the money flows, and it's about creating a better tomorrow for all. It just takes someone to go and solve these customer problems. And there's so many smart people at both incumbents and at fintech who are going to do this. It's not going to be easy, right? Because cross-border payments are inherently difficult. They shouldn't be, but inherently they are. Even in some, even in somewhere like the UK, the US, Europe, it shouldn't be hard. So then you go into kind of Africa, and I think Terry brought up the point about KYC. We're in whatever we think we're in the payments business, we're in the compliance business, right? So this is about kind of understanding who our customers are, making sure that money's being sent for the right reasons to the right people. But it's a really exciting time to be in this industry because there's some really smart people who are solving some of these problems. And I think, future looking, where do people want to get to? This is about creating that better tomorrow for everybody.
I actually would like...
Sorry, Matteo, I was going to jump in.
Sure.
I think the the role of identity and KYC is huge. If you look at what happened in India with UPI, it followed Aadhaar, which is this identity management infrastructure where everybody in the country had a government-issued ID that everybody trusted. In many, many markets, that's a piece of critical infrastructure that has to exist, or it has to be developed by the companies we're talking about. And so identity management, if you want to send funds in a regulated way, is one of the big infrastructure kind of building blocks. And I think if you want to look at, cross-border payments, once that infrastructure gets developed, and it has to be developed locally, like, someone in the US can't ID an individual in Tanzania. That has to be done by the local authorities in that country. And that's the infrastructure that I think we need in order to drive down a lot of the cost associated with the endpoints. So that's happening. I mean, today, I think the comparison is, you go to a physical store, you present some ID, some cash, gets sent to you. That's why it's so expensive. Once that moves to a digital platform, you will start to see those costs come down, which is why I think you're seeing a lot of efficiency on the B2B side. If you are a business who is transacting across border, there's just more infrastructure to kind of KYC the business and kind of manage that, that endpoint on any network, whether it's a Visa network, whether it's a crypto network, whether it's a SWIFT network. And I just want to sort of stress that as a critical building block.
Thank you, Terry. And I am rarely the number guy, but there is one number which is interesting, and is like from EY, $156 trillion. Expecting to be like the amplitude of the cross-border market this year, and we didn't label it, but EY says that emerging markets, financial inclusion, and customer demand are the three drivers, that are going to sort of amplify and to fuel this growth. And when we think about two things. First of all, do we all agree that financial inclusion, we touch on Africa, right? But there are plenty of other sort of regions with the same characteristics in the world. And in my humble opinion, if you couple this with, for example, the creators economy, or all this new people who will generate income, in a totally ubiquitous and digital ways, the creators economy are not going to come from developed markets. Most of it are these African TikTokers, that will need to receive payments in their own currency, right? So, do we all agree that that these three are the main drivers of growth for cross-border payment? Hugh, you want to chime in?
I'm not sure they're the only drivers, but they're definitely important drivers. At the moment in Revolut, we're rolling out in Mexico, Brazil, and in India. And so we are entering markets where the financial inclusion journey has not completed as much as the United States. But even in the United States, the financial inclusion journey still leaves significant portions of the population underserved. And we've been forced in the United States to develop specific propositions for certain parts of the community to better serve them, particularly remittance propositions for Latin American people of Latin American origin to send money home. We've just translated all of our adverts into Spanish, and we're working hard on that part of the inclusion. And that's really, really important. It's important for Revolut. It's also important at a societal level. We together need to do this. One of the fun facts that I really struggle with even now is why is it that as a consumer I can take cash but I can't take a Visa card? Discuss. In terms of financial inclusion, why can't I? And so, there are business problems which, as the fintech industry, we want to solve. Now, that is a domestic problem. It's a cross-border problem. How can we enable more people to participate in the ecosystem as equal players. And again, as Revolut, we've kind of had we actually view ourselves as having two ecosystems: a business ecosystem and a consumer ecosystem, and we're trying to bring those two things together to promote that inclusion. So that if you are a prosumer with a side gig or a side hustle, how can we give you the same capabilities as a corporation? That you can have those capabilities and compete on an equal footing as a virtual corporation, just you and, or maybe just you and your mates. And so we're working hard at the underserved elements to enable this to happen. And of course, wouldn't it be great if we could roll out Revolut, not just in the markets that I've just mentioned, but actually around the world? So that's a problem that we're looking at. How can we expand that footprint and bring the innovations that we have created to a wider market?
Yeah, I think your original question, I think is exactly right. And the way we look at it, I guess, is kind of leveling the playing field. And I think on not the flip side to Hugh's comments, but in terms of kind of bringing some of these business capabilities to the consumer, it's also the other way around, because the changing of consumer demand, we've seen a massive digitalization of the consumer over the last a few years, and that's creeping now into the B2B space. So the expectation for businesses who are kind of truly global to have the types of capabilities that we're used to as consumers. Everything is, we were pretty, we want everything to be available at the touch of a button now, and I think that's now seeping into the business space. So to talk on your kind of changing customer demands, there's a huge opportunity, I think, to continue to layer on innovation in the B2B payments world, of which there is obviously a huge amount of flow there.
One of the things that I wanted to just pick up is that central bank digital coins actually improve the service. There is no way for me to get money to Australia instantly today. And central bank digital coins enable me to get money there instantly. At certain points in the day, the banking systems turn themselves off. And Australia and UK are almost anti-phase. So if I do a transaction, it gets there overnight. So central bank digital coins actually help us improve the service. And every time you improve reach or you decrease prices and you decrease the friction, the volumes increase. So when I said earlier I didn't quite agree with everything you said, it was really this point that actually that there are new innovations coming through that are actually going to improve the service and enable those global businesses to work in new ways.
Terry, you see a lot of these new initiatives, especially in emerging markets, like the Visa Everywhere program, which I know decently well because I've been all to coach in a couple of instances. What's your comment on this?
You mean specifically how?
No. We were talking about the changing in customer demand, right? And especially in the B2B, right? There are a bunch of other businesses that are that did not exist. I mentioned the creator economy or the gigs economy for what that, and I don't know why, but I made the sort of the link into the Visa Everywhere program, which in Africa is strongly present. So there are a lot of these new businesses that are using this this facility, to get attention. That's why. Sorry, I might have distracted you from the question.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'll just sort of kind of talk from a Visa perspective. We touched on multiple things: financial inclusion, innovation, consumer expectations. I think the way we view how to support this ecosystem, first of all, we have our own principles. We believe in financial inclusion. We believe in better consumer experiences. We want to uplift people and bring them into the global economy. Our role in doing that is very much to support our clients who are at the endpoints of our network. A Chime, for example, they have many principles and many goals, one of which is financial inclusion. But financial inclusion is an outcome of them competing for business. They're the ones who are saying it's a good idea to have my payroll instantly available when it posts. Whereas in the past, in the US banking system, my payroll would post, but I may only have access to my funds up to 2 days later. So they're the kind of company that is improving access to my own funds. We support that. It's not Visa necessarily who is at the end point making that happen. Or you go to a B2B company like Jeeves, which is based in, that have a lot of infrastructure for cross-border payments in Latin America. They're the ones that are trying to figure out how to move funds between businesses. We support those types of businesses. So we very much view our role as to be a reliable, available rail so that others can innovate on that rail. And then we're pretty aware and open that there are multiple ways that money can move. Today, you can think of Visa as a very centralized network with certain guarantees, and we sit on top of a pretty buggy SWIFT ecosystem. It just takes time. I mean, Hugh mentioned banks close, and we have to ultimately, when you tap your Visa in a cafe in London, but your issuer is from Johannesburg, that cafe has certainty of payment guaranteed by Visa. I, as a consumer, have instant ability to leave with my coffee. Otherwise, if I had to wait 2 days, coffee's kind of cold. But we have to then make sure that the funds arrive at that merchant. Today, we do that on SWIFT and other rails. Tomorrow, that could be stablecoins. It doesn't impact our business because what consumers and businesses are asking for is that instant authorization layer. And in fact, you can settle with us in USDC in certain markets. So I think that's the way that we think about innovation. That's the way we think about financial inclusion, is allow others to build on the network and do the best job we can do to attract those partnerships. I'll say kind of one more thing. You mentioned the Visa Everywhere initiative. That's a startup competition that we sponsor in multiple parts of the world. One of the biggest things we've done is create something called a fast track program. And Hugh was actually one of the people when he was at Visa that really helped inspire us, which is how do we get fintech companies to be on our network when they're very, very young, when Nick and Vlad were, 16 people, Hugh, when you met them? And part of doing that is to make it very easy for them to onboard with us. One of my experiences coming as a payment, startup founder was, why can't I just apply to become a member of a Visa program online? And so we did that. We moved everything online. We have hundreds of fintechs who apply to our programs and go through a process where they can, in their market, figure out how to onboard with us. That's the way that we think about innovation. But we think all of the hard work, and I have great respect, is with the founders and CEOs of the endpoint companies and the fintechs that use the network.
Terry, you mentioned a couple of potentially big innovation on the horizon. You mentioned stablecoin. Of course, that would make cross-border payments instantaneously ubiquitous, as well as this mirage of the instant onboarding that could be a driver. So let's finish or let's end this show with a couple of 5 to 10 years horizon, and sort of share with us one or two drivers that you think will disrupt the business, or where the innovation will come from in the next 5 to 10 years. Richard, you the honor.
Oh, thank you. Is that specifically for Currencycloud, or just a general kind of view? I mean, I can give you in terms of where we're going, and I
suspect that the two will be kind of related, right? Because you wouldn't innovate for Currencycloud if you didn't think that is also an innovation for the market, right?
Correct, and it's going to be hand in hand with, I think, probably Terry's view. But I think for us, shorter term for us, and back to one of the original questions that I think Terry posed to me around, listen, how does everything work under the scenes? We've got to go and fix some of that as we grow and as we expand, particularly out in Asia Pacific, and that's a big focus for the next kind of year or two for us. And there's going to be a load of innovation out there. That's hard work. that's we talk about. Everybody likes to talk about kind of APAC, but it's 32 different countries and different regulators. So it's going there and really understanding kind of the customer problems out there. So I think number one is kind of Asia Pacific, and number two is we're looking at all of the stuff underneath, that you don't see in terms of our network and just how we can get better and how we can continue to get closer to kind of zero cost, zero time, and how we move the money physically. And that's a big project, right? It's a big project that sometimes the customers don't see directly, but they see massive impact. And that I'd love to give you a timeline, but I think we're very much focused the next kind of couple of years, and there'll be different projects as we go deeper with Visa in terms of together what can we go and achieve. I don't think we know that yet, right? So because it's such a fast-paced and fast-moving business, but I think there's Asia Pacific, the network behind stuff, and then continuing this movement of kind of embedded finance and how we support that, and at what point the transactions are starting and how we can go and serve that.
Hugh, what about Revolut?
So I think the fintech growth was a result of some conscious decisions by regulators to facilitate competition and reduce barriers. And what we have seen as a result of that and a bunch of innovative people is that we've seen a bunch of very new disruptive ideas come through. And companies like Revolut have exploited those ideas. I think that the next 10 years is going to be those companies that you see now in one market or two markets really grow and go global. The time of fintech is here. It's going to happen, and the changes to our digital monetary economy, to our actual economy, are going to flow through, and we're going to look back at this period as a sign of substantial change. If you look at, just take the UK where I am based today, the age of most of the banks is somewhere between 150 and 200 years old. When we look back 10 years from now about the companies that we are dealing with, we will be dealing with much younger companies who are changing and adapting and moving much faster. And I think we will look back on this as a time of tremendous energy and passion. And that won't be restricted to the developed markets. I remember I had a tremendous privilege of being a judge last year for the Emerging Payments Awards. And I remember reviewing entries in Latin America and Africa and places. And I saw some fantastic fintechs coming through that are transforming the economies of these markets. And I think we will see that worldwide.
Yeah, I think from my side, I'll be very quick. Agree with that. Digital KYC and identity management, integrated rails. I think we actually going to have an explosion of rails. We already have card rails, RTP rails, closed loop payment rails. Those are all ways that funds will flow around the world. And then I think there will be an impact on crypto, whether it's CBDCs or stable coins, things like streaming payments, payments that are locked in smart contracts. So I think from our perspective, it's very hard to predict and build a business around where the future is going. So our view is very much to support the innovation that is happening and do our best to be a choice for those companies that are innovating. And that's what I think we'll see Visa play across all of those different trends.
It sounds like everyone after embedded is putting a lot of words like payments, insurance, but embedded identity are two words that are not yet often put together. But that's how I interpret the initial statement that you just made. Guys, thank you very much for this convo. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. I am pretty sure that our auditors did as well. Thank you, Richard, to bring this show, to put this show together with us and the team as well. Natalie, who is behind the scene, and Hugh and Terry. Thank you for your insights, for being with us today. And usually there is a sort of we always end the show in saying, how can you guys reach us? But you guys are so big, so visible, and I could say all the single web addresses or places where people could get in touch with you. So I would simply say thank you for being with us, and until next show, it's a wrap. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.